Good morning, everybody, from cold Kansas City. We're being joined by Doug up there. You got snow on the ground again, and it's cold, and I'm cold. We were just talking about it. We had almost a 50-degree swing in 2 days in temperature, which is absolutely insane. But Doug, welcome. I appreciate you joining us again.
Good to be here.
I know a lot of the SafeDefend got a lot of folks down in Nashville this week. Got a big conference down there with school administrators and folks from all over. I talked to Dan yesterday. He said there was like 500 vendors and several thousand people. It was crazy big down there. So I know they got a lot going on and are busy.
Yeah, I think a lot of them had that cabin fever and they just couldn't, they needed to get out, and Nashville was the place to do it, and that's a good thing. So.
Yeah, it's good. So today, I think Doug and I were talking. Doug sent me some. Of course, Doug's in charge of all training and development at SafeDefend, and he had sent me an email and said, "Hey, let's talk about this. Let's talk about threats, basically, right? Talk about whether it's at a school board meeting or it's inside a building. It could be a bomb threat. It could be a verbal threat. It could be all these different things that we're seeing. More and more of today." Where people are just struggling, to be quite frank, with getting along. In a lot of cases, it's just a matter of decorum. But talk about that and talk about different ways that our folks can be safe and create a good environment.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things, of course, that we're seeing lately is that there is a precipitous uptick in threats that are being received either at the school board level or at the school level. One of the things I can tell you is that the greatest thing that happened, at least let's say in the 2000s and 2010s, was the removal of payphones from schools, because that, really dropped the number of bomb threats and threats that came up through the schools, just because that anonymity went away. And so for a long time that was okay, but now all of a sudden we're starting to get back into a situation where kids are very intelligent. They know how to use things like VPNs to disguise, who they're coming from, or burner phones, or they know how to create false social media accounts and stuff like that to make these threats. And so we're starting to see an uptick in that. And so we didn't see much of it during COVID, obviously, because nobody was in the building. There was just no reason to, threaten these sort of things. But now that we're back in schools and we're having some of these issues, there is a dramatic increase in the number of things like bomb threats or threats to shoot up schools or threats to do violence at school board meetings. And so we just want to make sure that people understand, some of the things they can do when those threats are transmitted, but also make sure that they understand the type of threats and how they should all be taken seriously. I want to caveat that every one of these should be taken seriously. But, when we talk about how possible these are, how probable these are, there are just not a lot of these threats that are followed through on. And so that's what we want to make sure we deal with.
Yeah, and I think too, we talked about it. You've always got to take these extremely serious, because unfortunately, when you don't, that's when it seems that these kind of things happen. But they are rare, thank God. They're rare, but they're there. And the reality right now in our world, with so many folks, I will say, having different opinions, it seems to get pretty heated and pretty upset. And we were talking about off the air a little bit, you see school boards right now is where there's just a lot of conflict at these meetings, and parents and folks in the community upset about decisions being made, and the back and forth involved that, without getting into the political aspects of that, because that's not anything that we're experts on what's right or what's wrong. But you get in that school board setting. A lot of times those, I know in a lot of small towns, they're not inside the schools. A lot of times they're off location or at a central administrative building. Walk us through that and just different things that can be done.
Yeah, so the biggest issue, like you're mentioning there, let's just talk about the school board meetings, is decorum is going to be the best thing. Yes, we want the people to make sure that they are behaving appropriately, but sometimes the enforcement of those rules has to be sort of, set aside in a sense. One of the things that I didn't ever understand, and when I was consulting with one of the school boards, they said, what should we do when somebody refuses to wear their mask or they're not wearing it properly? I said, well, first off, make sure that you put the podium 6 feet away from anybody, the board, from the group or whatever. And now you don't have to worry about them conditionally or not, wearing their mask, whatever. Yes, we want people to do it, but to cut people off on something like that, it's like when our children are trying to tell us a story and we're telling them until they tie their shoe, we're not going to listen to them. It just gets people frustrated. So sometimes we still seem to be forgetting that it was 6 feet or a mask, right? So if the person is up there isolated, they should be allowed to do whatever they, not whatever they want, but like you shouldn't keep interrupting them to put their mask on. And actually, if you're speaking, it is much better for somebody to convey a message to actually see what their facial expressions are as they're speaking, so that you can understand them. So I don't know why the board would want them to wear the mask. Keep them far from you, keep them there. That's one of the biggest things that we should do. But when we talk about the threats themselves, we have to understand that there are some very horrific things that are going on where school board members are being threatened individually, or those sort of threats are being conveyed that harm is going to come to them personally. Those are the things that definitely need law enforcement response. You need to make sure that they're notified, that they're there, and that they're taking those things seriously. So if somebody threatens the life of a school board member, you want to have law enforcement there. Everybody should arrive and plan to arrive at the same time, so law enforcement's out there in the parking lot and can escort you, say, into the building. And then the same thing would be to leave. That would be the biggest thing. But if they're threatening, say, the actual event, let's say you're going to talk about some hot subject, or there's a whether or not to get new AstroTurf on the soccer field. I know that's a huge issue that causes a lot of political turmoil. And so if that's the issue and somebody calls up and says, if you continue at that meeting tonight, then there's going to be retribution or something like that. That is an actual threat, right? Because we don't know what they mean by retribution. They could mean that retribution is going to be, I'm going to donate to your political opponent, or retribution is going to be, I'm going to work to get you out of office, or retribution is going to be, I'm going to do violence at the place. So we never know what that means, but we need to take it at its most extreme. And so that's sort of that conditional sort of threat. And that's what we want to talk about, is like basically the type of threats, just that conditional thing. It's usually met with some sort of demand. You better put the Snickers bars back in the vending machines, or put soda back in those things, or something bad's going to happen. That's conditional. Instrumental is just the type of thing like there's a bomb threat in the building, or there's the plane's going to blow up, or whatever. And usually in that situation, it's somebody that's trying to get out of a test, or they don't want to come to work that day, or it's I'll tell you, 99% of these type of threats are just kids that don't want to come to school that day. And so that's sort of that, you're right, instrumental thing. Then you have the stuff that's like the revenge. I'm going to make them pay for what they did. Like this would be like the basketball team hazing, or something like that, where somebody's mad that they got kicked off the team, or they got kicked out of an advanced class for cheating. And so then there's some sort of revenge motive to there. And then the last one is clearly just the hate crime one. And these are the ones that we tend to see are the most acted upon. It's just that hate crime for, maybe it's somebody's sexuality, maybe it's a race issue, maybe it's religion, maybe it's just some sort of issue that they hate about that school, right? And so those are the type of things that you have to look at, because those are people that obsess over an issue, and that obsession turns into some sort of action, and that overt action can be something that causes harm. And so that sort of conditional, instrumental, the revenge issues, and then the hate crimes are the things we have to look at. And the reason it's important to know those type of things is then you start to understand how serious is this threat.
Well, and what you said something early on that really kind of stuck with me, because I think one of the greatest possibilities where there could be acts of violence is inside these school board meetings. I mean, because you have adults. We're not talking about kids and adults. We're talking about adults who it's a very what's the right word I'm looking for here? But it's a very
contentious,
hot topic. Yeah, very contentious topic where people are I'm like I said, I'm going to keep my views to myself. But I mean, I can understand both sides. But what I've seen some stuff online where it really just comes down to, it sounds like just training with the staff to say, listen, people are going to say things. It's emotional right now. We got to be above this. Let's let them talk, say what they need to say. We'll thank them for their input, and we'll go to the next person. Right. That, to me, that seems to be the easiest way to prevent things from escalating. Right. You know what I mean? Now, but what you talked about is true. If somebody stands up there and points to somebody and says, you and I are going to have a problem out here, well, that's a whole different animal. I don't care what side you're on. You can't be in a place where you're threatening somebody's life or their health at a school board meeting. And I think, and I've seen some stuff online where they've gotten to these heated exchanges where the simple answer should be, I think you're correct, is just have law enforcement handle it. I mean, that's a law enforcement issue at that point. But I think it's so emotional, people want to debate it,
right.
you know, and I call it almost reminds me of this. You being a career law enforcement officer, you'll appreciate this. I had somebody years ago say, go watch these on YouTube. It's called First Amendment Audits, where these people go around and try to bait police officers into, you know, saying something they shouldn't or acting a certain way or whatever. And it almost reminds me of that, because every once in a while it's like two people that don't want to, each person wants the last word, you know? Right. And so it just keeps escalating. Instead of somebody just looking at them and going, okay, you know. Now, people that know me know that I'm the last guy to talk about de-escalation, but you know what I mean. I mean, it's. I think that seems to be the safest thing for everybody involved. Is if law enforcement needs to be involved, get them involved. If they don't, just rise above it and just let people say what's on their mind, and then thank them and go down the road. That seems to be the easiest way.
So it's funny you brought up that. So the police audits, which was a very popular thing, it still is. And believe it or not, I think school boards are being audited, because what people are doing, and the school boards have to recognize this, is that the school boards, they know they're going to go speak, they're going to plan ahead. So they all of a sudden start researching state laws and researching authorities of school boards, or some sort of executive order or something that applies to school boards. And so they know that, and that's the one topic that they're sort of versed on. So to try and engage them in that conversation doesn't work, right? But hey, you brought up some great points. I thank you for bringing that to the board's attention. We'll look into that and we'll make sure we're in compliance, blah, 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 blah. And we can get back to you if you need to. Go sign that little book over there and say you want us to respond, and give us your email address and we'll respond directly to you. You know, that's how you sort of put that off by saying, look, you can't expect us to respond to you in a legal format right here off the cuff. That's not how that works. It does kind of remind me, it's just a silly anecdotal story, but if you've ever been to Silver Dollar City, they always have these craftsmen, the horseshoe, the blacksmith, the barrel makers, or whatever. And I used to laugh. Right, the glass blowers, all this. And I used to love watching the ladies that made the quilts, the quilt ladies. They'd have like 3 or 4 ladies up there quilting, and they'd have this huge audience of people, and you could ask questions. And what I thought was so funny is the women asking questions, they weren't looking for an answer. They were trying to test their knowledge against the experts up there on the thing. And so I sometimes think like, sometimes when people go up in front of these school boards, they really don't want an answer from the school board. They just want to show that they know a little bit more than those school board members to kind of, do that. And so you just have to avoid that sort of engagement of back and forth.
And I think too, right now, just with the climate, I think there's just people just need to get something off their chest. I think I think right now a lot of it is they want to be heard. I think a lot of people feel like they're not being heard, and there's not a more volatile topic than when you're talking about somebody's child and another adult telling you what your child's going to do.
Right.
I mean, I don't care what. There's nothing in the world. I remember years ago we were at a grocery store. My wife, who's a professional school teacher, there was a gentleman that was doing some stuff with their kid that was, most people in the room, everybody was kind of sitting around going, wow, that ain't right. And here goes my little wife. She's like, you want me to buy him from you? I'll take him home with me. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what? Now I'm going to be forced to get involved in this. But kids bring out the most protective, basic elements we have as parents. You're more protective of your kids than you are anything in the world.
Right.
And so I think a lot of times if you go, I'm not saying it's easy, but if you just go to these meetings knowing that we're going to listen, we're not going to engage, we're just going to listen. We're going to thank them for being interested in what's going on in their child's education. Now, some people are going to be mad at that. They're going to be mad if you don't engage. And then that's going to become, and I get that, but it's still, what's that old saying, Doug? If everybody's talking about you and it's not good, don't worry about it. In 24 hours, they'll be talking about somebody else. It's
right.
Just the worst thing you can do is engage. Just let it go. Let it run its course. It'll be over. Right. Everybody can move along. They'll forget about it.
For sure. Just sometimes let it go. So one of the things I do want to touch is that, and I have been talking to school board members, and they're like, how do we have a safer meeting? And we can't always have a police officer there in our community or whatever. Well, first off, you should always have a sergeant of arms designated. And that person really doesn't have any authority, but they are there sort of as that 80-year-old bank security guard. It's just somebody that kind of represents that. And they should have some sort of yellow high visibility vest on that just lets them know that, hey, I'm the person that's just in charge of decorum or the door. The other thing too is that at school boards, you just can't open your doors. So let's say that you're going to have the school board meeting in the school or something like that. You literally need to put out the meeting starts at 7. Doors will open at 6:50. Meaning you don't want people showing up at 6:10 or 6:30 and just festering and stewing and all that sort of stuff. You want them waiting outside. You don't want them sort of colluding with others and getting having conversations in the area sometimes where they get whipped into a frenzy. So the biggest thing is that you got to control the doors. The other thing that gives you is it gives you a great opportunity right before the doors open is to scan the area and say, are there backpacks? Is there anything out of place? Anything that's questionable? So now all of a sudden I know that, there's no threat there. And then the other thing too is that there's a big process where like the school board members come in as some sort of regal group, and all of a sudden like the meeting starts at 7 and they all come in and they take their seats. You really should be in the room when the door is open. So if it's 6:50, the door is open, you should all be up front. You can be talking up front. You can be sitting there on your computer, whatever. But like you as a school board member should already be seated, meaning I'm here. I'm already in my position of authority. It actually puts you in a place of power because now you get to watch every person walk into the room. Why are they staring at the school board president? Like, why is this one person never broken contact and he's trying to get the attention or whatever? Those are the type of things that you can start to look at. Whereas if those people have been sitting in that room for 30 minutes and you come walking in like, all right, time to start, click. Like you don't have a feel for the room. You're not able to read the room, right? And so those are the things you should do is definitely not have the facilities where it is allowed to be seated until a specific time. And then the school board members should be in there. And then when you take a break, that's okay. If somebody leaves the school board, this is something that the sergeant at arms, somebody leaves the school board meeting, the sergeant at arms should make sure they take everything with them. So if they brought a backpack, if they brought a purse, they can't get up and leave without taking that with them. That's really important for just the safety of everybody. But you don't have to do anything. You just walk over to them as they're by the door and say, sir, you need to take your stuff with you. And he's like, oh, I'm just going to the bathroom. I'll be right back. And like, that's fine. But if you can go set it out there in the hallway, then you can go to the bathroom. But you just can't allow them to leave things in that room. And those little things that you have by having a sergeant at arms, by controlling the flow of when the meeting is, begins and ends, and then the making sure that people obey certain rules. Those are the things that are just going to demonstrate that authority that you need to then present to them that, hey, this is something that we are in control of, and it will reduce the threats that you might have occur in those type of situations.
Yeah, it's amazing how the little things, right? I mean, you talk about you see at airports, right? They always say, don't ever leave your bag unattended. Don't ever do this. Don't ever do that. It's and it seems like a little thing. I mean, people that aren't trained in that to think that way, many of them would go, especially if they don't mean anything by it, right?
Right.
I mean, they're just really wanting to go to the bathroom,
Right.
But you're like, why do I have to take my backpack? And then we'll be back, and they don't think about the possibilities of what somebody who was trying to do harm could do by doing that. But think back to the Atlanta Olympics, right?
Right.
The backpack, there was an explosion. I mean, that's the greatest. As far as in our country, probably the best example of why you want people to take that.
Right. And so the other thing to look for is like something else, the sergeant at arms, is that you should put in there a little disclosure on the notice for the meeting that, bags are subject to search at the discretion of, the sergeant at arms. Reason is you and I have been to these meetings, right? Backpacks are normal. Computer bags are normal, stuff like that. A giant, or let's just say a 18 by 18 by 18 inch cardboard box is not normal, right? So you just want to know what's inside of it, right? A suitcase on wheels, not normal, right? Some people bring a lot of stuff with them, but guess what? If you're going to bring something that big into this meeting, we're going to want to take a look at it, right? We're going to know what's coming in. And so those are the things. Should you be searching every backpack and every purse? Of course not. But you do want to look at search those things that look out of the ordinary, just to make sure that there's nothing, untoward being done. The other thing
let me ask you this real quick, because I think I know the answer, but you will know the answer. If you don't post that bags are subject to search, and somebody comes in and you decide to just search that person, is that legal?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is that what you have to understand is we tend to think of search and seizure on a sort of law enforcement level. Well, you're not looking for that. You're not looking to see if there's contraband or anything illegal in there. You're just doing the safety search. And so if you remember, we did this presentation on like what you're allowed to do on that. And so when your justification is searches, then you are the courts give you greater leniency as long as it's sort of identified as this is a public building. We've had some threats, and so we just want to make sure things are protected. And you're not looking for anything. And so that's the type of stuff that you say, is it legal? The answer is yes, it's legal in the sense of it's not an invasion of your privacy. But the other thing too is it's completely consensual, because guess what? If you don't want to be searched, you can leave. You got it. Yeah. And so those are the rules, right? Like if you show up and just start singing a song in the back row, they're going to ask you to leave, and the courts have said that's totally allowed, even in a public meeting. And so that's just becomes a condition of it. And so if you don't like the idea that they want to look inside of a bag, then that's or a suitcase, then that's on you to go ahead and take your rights and leave. And guess what? You can go put that in your car and come back without it, and you're perfectly in attendance. So is it legal? Yes, it's legal in the sense that it's not, a law enforcement thing. Now, here's the issue. If you do have a law enforcement officer that is your sort of sergeant at arms or your security, then you start to get into these sketchy areas, because that becomes, potentially a law enforcement search. And so that's where you're kind of like, that's why it's sometimes better to have a civilian law enforcement officer in those situations.
And I think one thing is, right now, so much of the frustration is that there's people on the side that believe there's way too much government overreach, whether it's school boards or city governments or county governments or state governments. There's that side. And then there's the other side that's like, well, no, we got a right to do, and there's so much confusion. And I think, to me, I've said this numerous times, our whole country needs a civics lesson.
Right.
Because we just, there's so many things that people believe are right that they've watched too much, TV growing up. I mean, they're not. Your example, and the reason I asked that about the searches, I had a guy say, well, they can search the kids if they're in school, but they can't search me. I'm a taxpayer. And I'm thinking, well, but we pay for that building, so we can go in that building and we can do, so there's all this misconception out there.
Right.
And I will say this, I get the logic behind it. I mean, I do, logic. I'm a taxpayer. If I want to walk into this building, our taxes pay for it. Why can't I walk in this building? I mean, I get it. I understand, but you got to add all the other stuff in to get the whole picture.
Right. Context is everything. It's always funny. People are like, you can't shut this down, or you can't. I'm like, so you're telling me if there's a fatality accident on the highway and there's danger and debris all across the highway, you have a right as a taxpayer to just drive right through that?
Right.
Like, no, we law enforcement has this temporary ability to suspend things, and public buildings have the ability to put certain rights to it, right? You can't go into the library at 2:00 in the morning just because you pay for it, because the hours are, till 5 to or 9 to 7 or whatever it is. Touching on a few quick things. One, I want to talk about the transmission of threat. One is like things like letters. Those are things we need to take care of, is just make sure that like letters tend to be, let's just say, a little more credible in the sense of by the time somebody takes the time to type up the letter, put out their demands, figure out the words they want to use. So those are type of things that sort of on the severity level, letters are probably one of the most likely that something like that would happen. Phone calls are, they're more impulsive and have a greater opportunity for tracking, so that people tend not to use them as much, but that's on the increase because of internet usage, stuff like that. But notes left behind, like on a teacher's desk or, somewhere like that, or writings in bathrooms, those tend to be the least credible. And the reason is because they could be easily missed, right? Like, oh, I'm going to write on this bathroom wall. And so those tend to be the things that are pranks, because the person who truly doesn't want to harm anyone, they just want a threat or something like that, they're going to want to make sure the message gets transmitted, and writing it on the wall or leaving it on a note is not going to be the best issue.
They just don't want to take the test on Friday.
Right, exactly. So the other thing too is that you need to go do some searching online for the exact. There's forums out there that you should do, but your teachers, your professional assistants at the front office should always have the ability to quickly answer certain questions. And so they should almost know these questions off the top of the head. But like the first thing you ask is, hey, there's a bomb in the building. When is this going to go off? When's it going to happen? What day? Is it today? Is it tomorrow? What time is it? You start asking these questions. Where in the building is it? What type of bomb is it? Believe it or not, this is something we're going to know. And so the more that they don't answer these questions, the more likelihood is that they are not going to be serious about this. Because one of the things you have to understand about a bomber is that there is a huge ego about it. And so they actually are wanting to brag about when it's going to go off. And because they, I can tell you exact time, in their mind, they're thinking, I'm so good. I know that this is going off at 12:15 because that's when I set it for, right? So they'll tell you that, right?
Look at the Unabomber.
Right, exactly.
All ego driven.
Yeah. And then if you can get those answers out of them, or if they don't answer them, don't waste your time asking these questions again if they don't immediately volunteer it. Make sure you get to the whole list, but also find is there a person you're targeting, or who's the message for? Who do you want us to know about? Is there a group or a policy you're trying to do it? And then the final thing you should always ask is, what do you want from me? Right? You called this bomb threat in. What do you want from me? And I want you to evacuate the school. Well, wait a second. If you want me to evacuate the school, that's the last thing I want to do. I don't want to give you what you want. Yeah, I want you to cancel school for the rest of the week. Okay, that's exactly something, and that's the type of information that'll help us figure out who's it's going to. And then you finally have the biggest issue, but I could tell you it's gone back and forth, is that when they used to get these bomb threats, they would almost always evacuate the building. I would tell you that unfortunately in schools, it is so easy to hide bombs in things like lockers and trash cans and backpacks, that probably if you get a bomb threat you deem credible, the safest place for those students is probably still in those classrooms. So you would want to hold the kids in the classroom, notify law enforcement, let them know that what you have. And so you probably are not in a situation where evacuating it is the issue, because the bomber also knows, and we saw this in Columbine and we saw this so much, they know where the point of exits are, right? So if I want to target the most people, I'm going to look for bombs by the trash can at the front door, the back doors, or whatever. Or I'm just going to wait for them all to go out to the bleachers because that's the only place they would head to. And I'm going to have something underneath the bleachers, and I'm going to now have a concentrated effort. And so those are the type of things that, hey, if you have everybody spread throughout the building, there's no bomb that anybody's going to be able to smuggle into a school that's big enough to take out that whole school and hurt all those kids. So individually pocketed within those classrooms is usually the best place until help can arrive.
It's crazy. We have conversations like these, Doug. I'm so glad we are having them, but it's nuts that we have to have them. I think, I appreciate you sharing today on these topics because they're so prevalent right now. I mean, it's everywhere. All you gotta do is go to YouTube and you'll see 5 or 6 new ones every day where there's a confrontation or, an argument or something that's going on where people are upset. But I think, education, common sense, like always, goes a long, long ways. And so I'm going to give you the last word, and we're going to wrap this episode up.
Yeah, so the biggest thing, like we were talking about, is courtesy and civility have to rule the day, and that is people just need to be heard. When if somebody calls in a bomb threat, usually they're not serious, but they just have a message they want to get out. Listen to them, even if they told it to one person. If you're that school board member, do us all a favor, put your phone down, endure the 2 hours of people sitting there ranting and raving, and then thank them for their time and tell them, like I said, have a book over on the side or someplace they can sign in and say, we'll put your issue over there with your email and we'll get back with you with an answer. But give them some response. Don't just dismiss them or tell them that they're not complying and therefore they can't be heard.
Because that's going to escalate every time.
You got it.
Every time.
The goal is to be safe.
So much. Thank you so much, brother. I know you guys are holding down the fort and at corporate this week. I talked to Dan and Jeff in Nashville. Sounds like they're working hard. Wink, wink. Wink.
That's right. Yeah. I hope anybody watching here had a good time at the happy hour last night. They tried to have an open and said, hey, everybody be there. So I haven't heard how that went, but I'm sure it went well.
I'm sure it did. All right, brother. We'll talk to you next Friday.
Be safe. Have fun.
All right. Take care, bud.